Welcome to Audiorama Onda Lectora. Make yourself comfortable and listen. Thea Audiobook Out of This World by Neville Goddard, an enlightening audiobook that delves into the power of the human imagination and its ability to shape reality.
Out of This World. Neville Goddard. Chapter 1. Thinking Four-Dimensionally. And now I have told you before it comes to pass, so that, when it comes to pass, you may believe. John 14:29. A great number of people, including myself, have witnessed events before they happen, that is, before they happen in this three-dimensional world. Because the human being is able to observe an event before it occurs in the three dimensions of space, life on Earth must unfold according to a plan. And this plan must exist in another dimension and move slowly through our space. If the events that occurred were not in this world when they were observed, then, to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world. And whatever was seen there before it occurred here, must be predetermined, from the point of view of the awakened man in a three-dimensional world. The question then arises, are we capable of altering our future? My aim in writing these pages is to indicate the possibilities inherent in man, to show that man can alter his future. But, once altered, he forms again a deterministic sequence, starting from the point of interference, a future which will be consistent with the alteration. The most remarkable characteristic of man's future is its flexibility. It is determined by his attitudes, rather than by his acts. The cornerstone, on which all things are based, is man's concept of himself. He acts as he does and has the experiences he has, because his self-concept is what it is, and for no other reason. If he had a different self-concept, he would act differently. A change in his self-concept automatically alters his future, and a change in any term of his future series of experiences reciprocally alters his self-concept. Man's assumptions which he considers insignificant produce effects which are considerable. Therefore, man must revise his estimate of an assumption and recognize its creative power. All changes take place in consciousness. The future, although prepared in every detail in advance, has various results. At every moment of our lives, we have before us the choice, which of several futures we will choose. There are two real perspectives of the world that everyone possesses, a natural approach, and a spiritual approach. The ancient masters called one the carnal mind, and the other the mind of Christ. We can differentiate them as ordinary waking consciousness, governed by our senses, and a controlled imagination, governed by desire. We recognize these two distinctive centers of thought in the statement, "The natural man accepteth not the things of the Spirit of God, because they are foolishness unto him, neither can he understand them, because they are spiritually discerned." Corinthians 1:2-14. The natural vision limits reality to the moment called now. For the natural vision, the past and the future are purely imaginary. Spiritual vision, on the other hand, sees the contents of time. It sees them as distinct and separate events, like objects in space. The past and the future are a present hold to the spiritual vision. What is mental and subjective to the natural man, is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. The habit of seeing only what our senses permit, leaves us totally blind to what we could otherwise see. To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we must often deliberately separate our minds from the evidence of the senses, and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and perceiving it, until it has all the distinctiveness of reality. Serious and concentrated thought, focused in a particular direction, excludes other sensations, and makes them disappear. We have to concentrate on the desired state, in order to see it. The habit of withdrawing attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on the invisible, develops our spiritual perspective, and enables us to penetrate beyond the world of the senses, and thus to see what is invisible. For the invisible things of him, from the creation of the world, are clearly seen. Romans 1:20. This vision is wholly independent of the natural faculties. Open it up and grasp it. Without it, these instructions are useless, because the things of the Spirit are spiritually discerned. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Desire is the main source of action. We could not move a finger unless we had the desire to move it. No matter what we do, we follow the desire that currently dominates our minds. When we break a habit, our desire to break it is greater than our desire to continue in the habit. The desires that drive us to action are those that hold our attention. A desire is nothing more than an awareness of something we lack or need to make our life more enjoyable. Desires always have some personal gain in view. The greater the anticipated gain, the more intense the desire. There is no absolutely selfless desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire, and consequently, no action. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The key to progress in life, and to the realization of dreams, lies in prompt obedience to his voice. Unhesitating obedience to his voice is an immediate assumption of desire fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. As Pascal said, "You would not have sought me if you had not already found me." Man, by assuming the sensation and feeling of his desire fulfilled, and then living and acting on this conviction, alters the future in harmony with his assumption. Assumptions awaken what they affirm. As soon as man assumes the feeling of his desire fulfilled, his tetradimensional being finds ways to reach this end, discovers methods for its realization. I know of no clearer definition of the means by which we realize our desires than to imagine what we would experience in the flesh if we reached our goal. This experience of the end will provide the means. With its broader perspective, the tetradimensional self constructs the means necessary to realize the accepted end. The undisciplined mind has difficulty to assume a state that is denied by the senses. Here is a technique which makes it easier to find events before they occur, to call things unseen as if they were. People have a habit to despise the importance of simple things, but this simple formula to change the future was discovered after years of research and experimentation. The first step to change the future is the desire, that is, to define your objective, to know definitely what you want. Secondly, construct an event that you think you would find after the fulfillment of your desire, an event that involves the fulfillment of your desire, something that will have the predominant action of oneself. Third, immobilize your physical body and induce a sleep-like state. Lie down on a bed or relax in a chair, imagine that you are about to sleep. Then, with your eyelids closed, and your focus concentrated on the action you aspire to live, in your imagination, immerse yourself in that proposed action, feeling in your mind that you are actually carrying it out here and now. You must always participate in the imaginative action, not just stand back and watch, but you must feel that you are actually performing the action, so that the imaginative sensation is real in you. It is important to always remember that the proposed action must be one that follows the fulfillment of your desire. And furthermore, you must feel yourself in the action, until it has the intensity and distinctiveness of reality. For example, suppose you want a promotion in the office. Being congratulated would be an event that you would encounter after the fulfillment of your desire. After you have selected this action, as the one you will experience in the imagination, immobilize the physical body, and induce a state similar to sleep, a state of drowsiness. A state in which you can still control the direction of your thoughts, a state in which you are effortlessly attentive. Now, imagine that a friend is standing in front of you. Put your imaginary hand in his. First feel that it is solid and real, then have an imaginative conversation with him, in harmony with the action. Don't see yourself at a distance, at a point in space at a future time, being congratulated for your success. Instead, make the other place here, and the future now. The future event is now a reality, in a dimensionally larger world. And interestingly, now in a dimensionally larger world, is equivalent to here, in ordinary three-dimensional space, of everyday life. The difference between feeling yourself in action, here and now, and visualizing yourself in action, as if you were on a movie screen, is the difference between success and failure. The difference will be appreciated, if you now visualize yourself climbing a staircase. Then, with your eyelids closed, imagine that a ladder is right in front of you, and feel that you are actually climbing it. Desire, physical immobility bordering on sleep, and imaginative action, in which the feeling of oneself, here and now predominates. Not only are they important factors in altering the future, but they are essential conditions for consciously projecting the spiritual self. If when the physical body is immobilized, we become possessed of the idea of doing something, and imagine that we are doing it here and now, and maintain the imaginative action, with the sensation of rising until sleep ensues. Then we are likely to awaken out of the physical body, to find ourselves in a dimensionally greater world, with a dimensionally greater focus. A place where we can actually do what we desire and imagine we were doing in the flesh. However, whether we awaken there or not, we are in fact performing the action, in the fourth dimensional world, and we will recreate it in the future here, in the three-dimensional world. My experience has taught me to concentrate the imaginary action, to condense the idea that will be the object of our meditation in a single act, and to repeat it again and again, until it acquires the sensation of reality. Otherwise, the attention will wander along an associative path, and a multitude of associated images will present themselves to our attention. In a few seconds, they will take us hundreds of miles away, from our target at a point in space, and years away at a point in time. If we decide to climb a particular flight of stairs, because that is the likely event, which follows the realization of our desire, then we must restrict the action, to climbing that particular flight of stairs. If our attention is diverted, we must return to the task of climbing that particular flight of stairs, and continue to do so until the imaginative action, has all the solidity and distinction of reality. The idea must be kept in the field of presentation, without any appreciable effort on our part. We must, with the minimum effort, permeate the mind with the sensation of the desire fulfilled. Drowsiness facilitates change, because it favors effortless attention. But it should not be taken to the stage of sleep, in which we no longer control the movements of our attention, but rather a moderate degree of drowsiness, in which we are still able to direct our thoughts. A more effective way to embody a desire, is to assume the feeling of the desire fulfilled. And then, in a relaxed and drowsy state, repeat over and over again, like a lullaby, any short phrase, which implies the fulfillment of our desire, such as, "Thank you." In such a way, as if we were addressing a higher power, for having done it for us. However, if we seek a conscious projection into a larger dimensional world, then we must keep the action going until the dream comes. Experience in the imagination, with all the distinction of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh, if you were to achieve your goal. Then you will meet it in time in the flesh, just as you met it in your imagination. Feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions that are presumed to be true. For assumptions, though unreal to the senses, if you persist in them, until they have the sense of reality, they will become facts. For an assumption, all means that promote its realization are good. It influences the behavior of all, inspiring in all movements, actions and words, which tend to its realization. To understand how man shapes his future in harmony with his assumption, we must know what we mean by a dimensionally larger world. For it is to a dimensionally larger world, that we go to alter our future. The observation of an event before it occurs, implies that the event is predetermined, from man's point of view, in the three-dimensional world. Therefore, to change conditions here, in the three dimensions of space, we must first change them, in the four dimensions of space. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world, and no doubt, he would deny the existence of a dimensionally larger being. He is quite familiar with the three dimensions of length, width and height, and feels that if there were a fourth dimension, it should be as obvious to him as the dimensions of length, width and height. A dimension is not a line, it is some way in which a thing can be measured, which is completely different from all the other ways. That is, to measure a fourth dimensional solid, we simply measure it in any direction, except in its length, width and height. Is there any other way to measure an object other than its length, width and height? Time measures my life, without employing the three dimensions of length, width and height. There is no such thing as an instantaneous object. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It lasts for a definite period of time. We can measure its lifetime, without using the dimensions of length, width and height. Time is definitely a fourth way to measure an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line, which is entirely in one dimension, acquires form, mass and substance, by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give that would make it as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces, and surfaces are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience, because all changes take time. The new quality is mutability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we get a line, and by bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is nothing more than a cross-section of a line, which is, in turn, a cross-section of a surface, which is also in turn, a cross-section of a solid. Which is, in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, only a cross-section of a four-dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are only cross-sections of four-dimensional bodies. Which means, when I meet you, I meet a cross-section of the four-dimensional self, the four-dimensional self that is not seen. To see the four-dimensional self, I must see each cross-section or moment of your life, from birth to death, and see them all as coexisting. My approach should encompass the full range of sensory impressions you have experienced on earth, in addition to those you may encounter. I should see them, not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as a present whole. Because change is the characteristic of the fourth dimension, you should see them in a state of flux, as a living, animated whole. Let all this be fixed in our minds. What does it mean for us in this three-dimensional world? It means that, if we can move through time, we can see the future, and modify it as we wish. This world, which we consider solidly real, is but a shadow from which, and beyond which, we can move at any instant. It is an abstract representation of an essential and dimensionally larger world, which in turn is an abstraction of an even more fundamental and dimensionally larger one, in a succession that extends to infinity. The Absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Man can demonstrate the existence of a dimensionally larger world by simply focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and feels it. If he remains concentrated in this state, his present environment will disappear, and he will awaken in a dimensionally larger world, where the object of his contemplation will be seen as a concrete objective reality. Intuitively I feel that, if he were to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally larger world, and withdraw further into his mind, he would again cause an externalization of time. I would discover that every time he withdraws into his inner mind, and causes an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally larger. And he would conclude, therefore, that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the escalation of a multitudinous block of dimensional time. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe. But in practice, it is more important how we use this serial universe to change the future. To change the future, we only need to deal with two worlds in the infinite series, the world we know through our bodily organs, and the world we perceive, independently of our bodily organs. Chapter 2. Assumptions become facts. Men believe in the reality of the external world, because they do not know how to concentrate and condense their powers, in order to penetrate its thin crust. This book has but one purpose, to remove the veil of the senses, and to travel to another world. To remove the veil of the senses, we do not employ a great effort, the objective world vanishes, when we turn our attention away from it. We have only to concentrate on the desired state in order to see it mentally. But to give it reality, in order for it to become an objective fact, we must focus attention on the invisible state, until it has the sensation of reality. When through concentrated attention, our desire seems to possess the distinction and the sensation of reality, we have given it the right to become a visible concrete fact. If it is difficult to control the direction of your attention, while you are in a dreamlike state, you may find it very helpful to stare at an object. Do not look at its surface, but into and beyond any simple object, such as a wall, a carpet, or any other object that possesses depth. Do it in such a way that it gives back as little reflection as possible. Imagine then that in this depth, you are seeing and hearing what you want to see and hear, until your attention is only occupied by the imagined state. At the end of your meditation, when you awaken from your controlled waking dream, you feel that you have returned from a great distance. The visible world that you had excluded returns to consciousness, and by its very presence, informs you that you have deceived yourself, believing that the object of your contemplation was real. But, if you know that consciousness is the only reality, you will remain faithful to your vision, and by this sustained mental attitude, you will confirm your gift of reality. Thus you will demonstrate that you have the power to give reality to your desires, so that they become visible concrete facts. Define your ideal, and concentrate your attention on the idea of identifying yourself with your ideal. Assume the feeling of being it, the feeling that would be yours, if you were already the incarnation of your ideal. Then live and act on this conviction. This assumption, though denied by the senses, will, if you persist, become fact. You will know when you have succeeded in fixing the desired state in consciousness, simply by looking mentally at the people you meet. In dialogues with yourself, you are less inhibited and more sincere than in actual conversations with others. And therefore, the opportunity for self-analysis arises when you are surprised by your mental conversations with others. If you see them as you saw them before, you have not changed your self-concept, for all changes in self-concepts result in a change in your relationship to your world. In your meditation, allow others to see you as they would see you if this new self-concept were a concrete fact. You always appear to others as the embodiment of the ideal you inspire. Therefore, in meditation, when you contemplate others, you must be seen by them mentally, as you would see yourself physically, if your concept of self were an objective fact. That is, in meditation, you imagine that they see you expressing what you wish to be. If you assume that you are what you want to be, your desire is fulfilled, and in the fulfillment, all longing is neutralized. You can no longer desire what you have already fulfilled. Your desire is not something you work to fulfill, it is to recognize something you already possess. It is to assume the feeling of being, that, which you desire to be. Believing and being are one. The conceiver and his conception are one, therefore, that which you conceive yourself to be, can never be so far away, as even to be near, for nearness implies separation. If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Mark 9:23. Being is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. If you assume that you are what you want to be, then you will see others in relation to your assumption. However, if it is the good of others that you desire, then, in meditation, you must represent them to yourself as already being, that, which you desire them to be. It is through desire that you rise above your present sphere. And the path from longing to fulfillment is shortened as you experience in the imagination what you would experience in the flesh if you were the embodiment of the ideal you wish to be. I have stated that man has before him at every moment of time the choice of which of several futures he will find. But the question arises, how is this possible when man's experiences, awake in the three-dimensional world, are already predetermined? For his observation of an event before it occurs, implies it. This ability to change the future will be seen, if we compare the experiences of life on earth, with this printed page. Man experiences the events on earth, individually and successively, in the same way, as he now experiences the words on this page. Imagine that each word on this page represents a unique sensory impression. To grasp the context, to understand my point, direct your gaze to the first word in the upper left corner, and then shift your attention from left to right across the page. Let each word be assimilated, individually and consecutively. By the time you reach the last word in this writing, you will have grasped my message. Suppose, however, as you look at the page, with all the words printed on it equally present, you decide to rearrange them. You could, by rearranging them, tell a completely different story, and in fact, you could tell many different stories. A dream is nothing more than an uncontrolled four-dimensional thought, or the rearrangement of sensory impressions, past and future. Man rarely dreams of events, in the order in which he experiences them, when he is awake. Usually, he dreams of two or more events separated in time, merged into a single sensory impression. Or in his dream, he rearranges his waking sensory impressions so completely, that he does not recognize them, when he encounters them in his waking state. For example, I dreamt that I delivered a package, to the restaurant in my apartment building. The hostess told me, "You can't leave that there," after which, the elevator operator gave me some cards, and as I thanked him for them, he, in turn, thanked me. At this point, the night elevator operator appeared, and waved to me. The next day, as I was leaving my apartment, I picked up some letters that had been placed on my door. As I was going downstairs, I tipped the daytime elevator operator, and thanked him for taking care of my mail. Whereupon he thanked me for the tip. On my return home that day, I overheard a doorman say to a delivery man, "You can't leave that there." As I was about to take the elevator up to my apartment, a familiar face in the restaurant drew me in, and when I looked over, the hostess greeted me with a smile. Later that evening, I escorted my dinner guests to the elevator, and when I said goodbye to them, the night operator waved me off. Simply, rearranging some of the individual sensory impressions, I was bound to find. As well as merging two or more of them, into individual sensory impressions, I constructed a dream that differed quite a bit, from my waking experience. When we have learned to control the movements of our attention in the four-dimensional world, we can consciously create circumstances in the three-dimensional world. We learn this control through waking sleep, where our attention can be maintained effortlessly, as effortless attention is indispensable to change the future. We can, in a controlled waking dream, consciously construct an event, which we wish to experience in the three-dimensional world. The sensory impressions, which we use to construct our waking dream, are time-shifted present realities, or the four-dimensional world. All we do in constructing the waking dream is to select from the wide range of sensory impressions those that, when properly organized, imply that we have realized our desire. With the dream clearly defined, we relax in a chair, and induce a dreamlike state of consciousness. A state that, although bordering on sleep, leaves us in conscious control of the movements of our attention. When we have reached that state, we experience in imagination, what we would experience in reality, if this waking dream were an objective fact. When applying this technique to change the future, it is important to always remember, that the only thing that occupies the mind during the waking dream, is the waking dream. The predetermined action, which implies the fulfillment of our desire. The manner in which the waking dream becomes a physical fact is not our business. Our acceptance of the waking dream, as a physical reality, enables the means for its realization. Let me again lay the groundwork for changing the future, which is nothing more than a controlled waking dream. 1. Define your objective, understand definitively what you want. 2. Construct an event that you believe you will find, after the fulfillment of your desire, something that will have the predominant action of oneself, an event that implies the fulfillment of your desire. 3. Immobilize the physical body, and induce a state of consciousness similar to sleep. Then, mentally sit in the proposed action, imagining all the while, that you are actually performing the action here and now. In such a way, that you experience in the imagination, what you would experience in the flesh, if you were now realizing your goal. Experience has convinced me that this is the perfect way to achieve my goal. However, my own failures would condemn me if I were to imply that I have completely mastered the movements of my attention. Nevertheless, as the ancient teacher said, this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching out to those things which are before, I press toward the goal for the prize. Philippians 3:13-14. Chapter 3. The Power of Imagination. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall make thee free. John 8:32. Men assert that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates. This means that if I, while imprisoned, suggest to myself that I am free, and succeed in believing that I am free, it is true that I believe in my freedom. But that does not mean that I am free, because I may be a victim of an illusion. But because of my own experiences, I have come to believe in so many strange things, that I see little reason to doubt the truth of things, which are beyond my experience. The ancient masters warned us, not to judge by appearances because, they said, truth need not conform to the external reality, to which it relates. They stated that we bear false witness, if we imagine evil against another, that no matter how real our belief appears to be, how truthfully it conforms, to the external reality to which it relates. If it does not set free the individual, of whom we hold the belief, it is not true and, therefore, is a false judgment. We are called to deny the evidence of our senses, and imagine as true of our neighbor, that which makes him free. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall make thee free. John 8:32. To achieve genuine understanding of the reality of our fellow man, we must adopt the perspective that he has already achieved what he wishes to be. Any notion we have about another individual, which is inferior to his fulfilled desire, will not set him free, and therefore, cannot be considered the truth. Instead of following a traditional educational path, where attending classes and seminars is considered a substitute for self-taught knowledge, my learning focused primarily on the power of imagination. I sat for hours, and imagined myself being other different than what my reason and senses dictated, until the imagined states were vivid as reality. So vivid that the bystanders became a part of my imagination, and acted as I wanted. By the power of imagination, my fantasy led theirs, dictated their behavior, and the discourse they held together, while I was identified with my imagined state. The imagination of man is man himself, and the world as the imagination sees it, is the real world. It is our duty to imagine all that is lovely, and of good report. The Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Samuel 1:16-7. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. In meditation, when the brain becomes luminous, I find my imagination endowed with magnetic power, with which to attract to me all that I desire. Desire is the power the imagination uses to model life about me as I model it within myself. First I desire to see a certain person or scene, and then I see myself as seeing what I want to see, and the imagined state becomes objectively real. I wish to listen, and then I listen as if I am listening, and the imagined voice says that which I dictate, as if it had initiated the message. I could give you many examples, to prove my arguments, to demonstrate that these imagined states become physical realities. But I know that my examples will arouse a very natural incredulity in all those who have not had similar experiences, or who are not inclined to my arguments. However, experience has convinced me of the truth of the statement, "He calls things that are not, as though they were." Romans 4:17. For, in intense meditation, I have called things that were not seen as if they were seen, and the invisible not only became visible, but eventually, they became physical reality. By this method, first wishing and then imagining, that we are experiencing what we wish to experience, we can shape the future in harmony with our desire. Let us follow the advice of the prophet, and think only of the beautiful and the good, because the imagination awaits us with as much indifference and speed, when our nature is bad, as when it is good. From us spring good and evil. I have set before thee this day life and good, death and evil. Deuteronomy 30:15. Desire and imagination are the fabled wand of the enchanter, and draw to themselves their own affinities. They are best opened, when the mind is in a dreamlike state. I have written with care and detail the method I use, to enter the dimensionally larger world, although I will give a new formula, to open the door to the larger world. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep calls men, slumbering upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men, and seals his instruction. Job 33:15. During sleep, we are usually the servant of our vision, rather than its master. Still, the inner fantasy of the dream can become an external reality. In the dream, as in meditation, we slip from this world to a dimensionally larger world. And I know that the forms in the dream are not flat two-dimensional images, which modern psychologists believe them to be. They are substantial realities of the dimensionally larger world, and I can hold on to them. I have found that, if I catch myself dreaming, I can cling to any form, inanimate or stationary in the dream, a chair, a table, a ladder, a tree, and command myself to wake up. At the command to awaken, while clinging tightly to the object of the dream, I feel pulled by myself, with the clear sensation of awakening from the dream. I awaken in another sphere, holding the object of my dream, to find that I am no longer the servant of my vision, but its master, for I am fully conscious, and in control of the movements of my attention. It is in this fully conscious state, when we have control of the direction of thought, in which we call things that are not seen, as if they were seen. In this state, we call things desiring and assuming the feeling of our desire fulfilled. Unlike the three-dimensional world, where there is an interval between our assumption and its fulfillment, in the dimensionally larger world, there is an immediate realization of it. The external reality instantly reflects our assumption. Here there is no need to wait 4 months until the harvest. We look again as if we see it. And lo and behold, the fields are already white for harvest. In this dimensionally larger world, thou shalt not need to fight. Prepare thyself, stand still, and behold the salvation of the Lord with thee. Chronicles 2:20-27. And because that larger world is slowly passing through our three-dimensional world, we can, by the power of imagination, shape our world in harmony with our desire. Look as if you have seen, listen as if you have heard, stretch out your imaginary hand as if you have touched, and your assumptions will solidify into fact. For those who believe that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates, this will be foolishness and a stumbling block. I preach and practice fixation, in the consciousness of what man desires to realize. My personal experience convinces me that ingrained mental attitudes, even if they do not conform to the external reality they seem to relate to, and therefore, are categorized as imaginary or things that are not, still, they have the power to annihilate the things that are. I do not aspire to write a compendium of prodigies, but rather, to guide the mind of the human being towards the only reality, which the ancient sages worshipped as God. All that was said of God, was said in reality of the conscience of man, so that we can say that, as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in his own conscience. Corinthians 1:31. No man needs help to direct him, in the application of this law of conscience. I am, is the self-definition of the Absolute. The root, from which everything grows. I am the vine. John 15:5. What is your answer to the eternal question, who am I? Your answer determines the role you play in the world drama. Your answer, that is, your concept of yourself, need not conform to the external reality, to which it relates. This great truth, is revealed in the statement, let the weak say, I am strong. Joel 3:10. Look back the good resolutions, with which are encumbered many new years past. They lived a little and then died. Why? Because they were separated from their root. Assume that you are, what you want to be. Experience in the imagination, what you would experience in the flesh, if you were already, that, which you want to be. Remain true to your assumption, so that you define yourself as, that, which you have assumed. Things have no life if they are separated from their roots, and our consciousness, our I am, is the root of everything that springs up in our world. If ye believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your trespasses. John 8:24. That is, if I do not believe that I am already, that, which I desire to be, then I remain as I am, and die in my present concept of myself. There is no power, outside of man's consciousness, to resurrect and revive, that, which man desires to experience. That man who is adept, in calling up at will any image he pleases, will, by virtue of the power of his imagination, be master of his destiny. I am the resurrection and the life, he that believeth on me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. John 11:25. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall make thee free. Chapter 4. No one to change but self. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also may be sanctified, through the truth. John 17:19. The ideal we serve and strive to reach, could never evolve from us, if it were not potentially involved in our nature. It is now my purpose, to retell and emphasize an experience of mine, impressed by me 2 years ago. I believe that these quotes, from the book of The Search, will help us to understand the functioning of the law of consciousness, and show us that we do not have to change anyone else, but oneself. Once, in an inactive interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state. There I wondered what it would be, if I had eyes too pure to behold iniquity, if to me all things were pure, and if I were without condemnation. I found myself elevated, above the dark atmosphere of the senses. So intense was the sensation, that I felt like a being of fire inhabiting a body of air. Voices as of a heavenly choir, with the exaltation of those, who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, sang, He is risen, and intuitively, I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. Soon I came upon a scene, which could have been the ancient Bethesda pond. John 5:2. In this place, there was a large crowd of powerless people, blind, lame, paralyzed, who were not waiting for the movement of the water by tradition, but were waiting for me. As I approached, without thought or effort, they were modeled, one after another, by the Wizard of the Beautiful. The eyes, the hands, the feet, all the missing limbs, were drawn from an invisible reservoir, and modeled in harmony with that perfection, which I felt welling up inside me. When all was perfected, the choir rejoiced, singing, It is finished. Then, the scene dissolved, and I awoke. I know that this vision was the result of my intense meditation on the idea of perfection, because my meditations invariably cause union with the contemplated state. I was so completely absorbed in the idea, that for a time I became what I contemplated. And the high purpose, with which I had identified myself at that moment, attracted the company of high things, and formed the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united, works by association of ideas, to awaken 1,000 moods, with which to create a drama in accordance with the central idea. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no other way to achieve the external perfection we seek than by transforming ourselves. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will magically melt before our eyes, and reform in harmony with what our transformation affirms. In the divine economy nothing is lost. No help comes from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes, are those of an inner range. Therefore, it is to our own consciousness, that we must turn as the only reality, the only basis, on which all phenomena can be explained. To attempt to change the world, before changing our concept of ourselves, is to fight against the nature of things. There can be no external change, until there is first an internal change. As it is within, so it is without. I am not advocating philosophical indifference, when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as what we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness. Instead of using physical means and arguments, to achieve the desired change. Everything we do, not accompanied by a change of consciousness, is only a futile readjustment of surfaces. Regardless of how we work or struggle, we can receive no more than what our assumptions assert. To protest against anything that happens to us, is to protest against the law of our being, and our authority over our own destiny. The circumstances of my life are too closely related to my conception of myself not to have been formed by my own spirit from a higher dimensional storehouse of my being. If there is pain for me in these events, I must look within myself for the cause, as they move me here and there, and make me live in a world in harmony with the concept I have of myself. Intense meditation produces a union with the contemplated state, and during this union, we see visions, we have experiences, and we behave according to our change of consciousness. This shows us that a transformation of consciousness will result in a change of environment, as well as a change of behavior. All wars show that violent emotions are extremely powerful to precipitate mental rearrangements. Every great conflict was followed by an era of materialism and greed, in which the ideals for which the conflict was fought are apparently submerged. This is inevitable, because war evokes hatred, which drives a descent of consciousness from the plane of the ideal, to the level where the conflict is fought. If we became as emotionally susceptible to our ideals as we are to our dislikes, we would ascend to the plane of our ideal as easily as we now descend to the level of our hatreds. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise, into the likeness of what we contemplate. By the intensity of hatred we create in ourselves, the character we imagine in our enemies. Qualities die by inattention, so that unpleasant states might be effaced, by imagining beauty for ashes, and joy for mourning. Isaiah 61:3. Whatever things are lovely and of good report, think on these things. Philippians 4:8. We change into that, with which we are in tune. There is no need to change anything else, other than our perception of ourselves. Once we achieve this transformation, our environment will fade away, and will automatically reconfigure itself, in consonance with what our transformation declares.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this audiobook, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more enriching content like this. Wishing you a journey filled with abundance, manifestation, and fulfillment. Until next time, may your imagination continue to guide you towards a life out of this world. Subscribe now and embark on a limitless voyage of self-discovery and empowerment.